as investment advice or a recommendation to buy shares in the company featured. Welcome to this Stockbox interview. Joining me on Stockbox today is the Executive Director of Kavango Resources, Ben Turney. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Mark.
How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Yes, very good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. So, since your appointment at the start of this year, how are you finding working as an Exec Director at Kavango?
Oh, honestly, I'm loving it. It's been a huge amount of work, as you'd expect. Moving into a role like this, when you become a director of a company, there's obviously a lot more that you officially sort of have to learn about the company, sort of the way that it does things, the various people who are involved, quite a lot of confidential information as well, sort of really getting a very firm idea of where we're at with our various projects. We went through quite a detailed budgeting process at the start, which was very helpful. And I'm really glad to say that everything I've found so far, I'm delighted with. This is a very well-run company, very disciplined. We operate, tight financial management. I think about some of the messes that I've seen in the small cap world over the years, both companies that I've taken over and companies that previously I investigated. And for me, one of my biggest motivations of making this transition into this type of role is I was just so sick of just seeing how poorly run so many businesses are at this end of the market, and especially in the minerals exploration space. Realistically, there's no chance of reforming the market. So I wanted to come and join a business which was actually, using the market in the right way. And I've got to say, everything I've seen so far, I'm really, really happy with. We're a very tightly run ship. So our total PLC overhead, just to give an indication of this, is only £300,000 a year. Mm-hmm. Our total board cost is £160,000. So compared to our peers, we're extremely lean. And we also have significant skin in the game. Directors currently hold 17.2% of the company. The original founders hold another 10.5%. So as much as possible, as one can as a director, I do feel that our interests are aligned with shareholders. I mean, obviously, we'll never be fully aligned with shareholders because we're directors of the company. But in terms of sort of backing a management team and a business with an extremely ambitious plan, with a genuinely ambitious project, or series of projects, actually, I think Kavango is a wonderful exploration company to be involved in.
Okay, thank you very much. So I also see this morning that the directors have just exercised 9 million warrants. So what's the rationale behind that, Ben?
Yeah, well, the simple answer to that, Mark, is that we're feeling very confident. We're very confident in the business. We all participated in the fundraise last year when these warrants were exercised. It means that collectively we've put another £90,000 into the company. So we've obviously raised our stakes. We're obviously locked in. I mean, this isn't a trading position that we've taken. One of the things that always, bothered me as a private investor was when I'd see directors get awarded options and warrants, and they would just treat that like a free ride. These are warrants that have got a number of years still to run on them. We do, of course, get 2.5p replacement warrants. But what we're actually doing is, we're increasing our skin in the game and providing the company with more capital. And I think this helps further align our interests with shareholders.
Okay. Now, as we were talking just before the interview, you told me you just finished the virtual Endaba. So can you tell us what that is and your experiences there?
Yeah, I've honestly never experienced anything like it in my life. I mean, I work hard. I've got a good work ethic, but the last 3 days has been like nothing else. So Indaba is one of the world's main mining conferences. It's a bit of a jolly for a lot of people in the mining sector. They'll go down to South Africa and all sort of network in inverted commas, all have a good time as well. Obviously, with the COVID restrictions this year, that's off. But one of the events down at Indaba is called One-to-One, which is meant to be sort of much more of like a professional networking opportunity where investors are brought together with mining companies. So this is everybody from sort of small private investors through to major multinational funds, multinational companies, trading, sort of commodity trading companies, the whole spectrum was there. And so we signed up to this and we got a huge amount of inbound interest. So it was back to back-to-back half-hour meetings over 3 days, starting at 7 a.m., going through to 7 at night. I mean, obviously, it wasn't fully booked the whole time, but we had a phenomenal response. We ended up giving 40 presentations over the last 3 days. So I got to last night and I was feeling pretty fried. And 3/4 of that interest, 31 of those meetings, were inbound requests. So we spoke to a lot of large companies, large investors. We spoke to brokers. We spoke to smaller investors as well. We had a few sort of individuals on there. So it was a really, really good opportunity just to talk about what we're doing, in particular in the KSZ, where we're opening up what could be a major new mining centre, but also in the KCB, where we have in the Kalahari Copper Belt, where we have two joint ventures that we're working on, which are slightly at an earlier stage, but are on a much more accelerated work programme.
So 40 presentations. Wow, that's one way to start your new role, isn't it? You must be very affair with everything that's going on in the company now.
Oh, it was brilliant. By the end of it, we honed the presentations to such a point that even Mike Moles, our technical director, by the end was getting people to buy stock. It was brilliant. It was so good. But yeah, it was a really good experience, really sort of positive and affirming, and I feel a lot of the interest there is genuine. Okay.
Well, let's move on to the company and some news that's been released recently. And last week you announced the completion of the first time domain electromagnetic survey in the northern Hukunsi section of the Kalahari Suture Zone. So you've got some more targets to cover. What are the timescales for completion there, getting results back, and the next steps?
Sure. Well, these TDEM surveys are extremely important. We've historically flown airborne surveys over Hukunsi, which was certainly very useful and was a major contributory factor to the 3D underground model that we've produced. I've actually put out on my personal Twitter account, which is also being published on Kavango's Twitter account, which is at Kavango Res, R-E-S, if you want to follow us. And you can see a screenshot from our 3D magnetic model of Hukunsi. What we're now doing with these TDEM surveys, they're very powerful. They're called large loop, or we call them colloquially large loop surveys. They're a very powerful ground-based surveying technique, which can penetrate up to 1,000 meters. And the way that these work, if you imagine that a large sort of copper wire, which is 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, so it's a kilometer squared, is laid out on the ground, and then a powerful electric current is run through that wire. That sends an electric signal into the Earth's crust, down to about 1,000 meters. And obviously that current passes through much less conductive rock, basement rock, and the gabbros that we're looking at. Now, the nature of the formations that we're looking for, these magmatic sulfide deposits, by their very nature, they're very tightly packed, and obviously they're metallic. So they're like, for want of a better phrase, they're like a large copper wire buried in the ground. And obviously the electric signal that those return, because they conduct electricity so much faster, gives a very, very different signal to the receivers back at surface. So these are called high-speed conductors. So what we're looking for now are these high-speed conductors that sit within the gabbros. So the gabbros are the solidified magma, the Karoo age solidified magma that formed sort of 180 to 140 million years ago. Now, if we identify any of conductors within these formations, within these gabbroic formations, which obviously we've mapped with our underground model, then those will become extremely high priority drill targets for us. So we completed the first survey a week or so ago. The second survey is currently underway. We're surveying 4 main target areas. Details are on the RNS that we published recently. And we're conducting 6 surveys. We're hoping that the surveys will take maybe 8 weeks, 10 weeks possibly. Obviously, it all depends on sort of getting the equipment into the field. So far COVID hasn't been an issue, but obviously you never know how that may or may not affect things. But we're hoping sort of over the next 10 weeks or so we'll get the results of the surveys back. Now we're about releasing results from individual surveys that we run, because once we get the data back from the field, we send that off to Mira Geoscience, who's the contractor that has helped us with helped our in-house geologists and geophysicists with the underground model. So the data processing is ongoing, and we'll look to update the market as soon as we've discovered anything.
Okay, great. And sticking on the KSZ, then I saw earlier in the week that Kavango have applied and received new licenses to the south, and you've announced a work program. Can you talk us through these licenses, the work plan, and the timeline?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, this is another exciting development for the company. So, if you look on our website, you'll see a map of the KSZ, a magnetic map of the KSZ.
Hmm.
It's a 450-kilometre long anomaly, which Kavango, even though we're such a small company, to all intents and purposes, we have a controlling stake over it. Now, we focused our exploration in the northern section in our Hakunsi licenses because that's where there was some historic drilling from the Canadians back in the 1980s. So there was at least some geological data that we could use to develop this underground 3D model that we've created. Now, we've obviously learned a hell of a lot in the northern section, and what we're looking to do is to take that knowledge and then apply that to the southern section. So our main goal down there is to create a similar underground map to the one that we've created at Hakunsi. This, as our shareholders will know, this is all largely desktop work, so it's compiling thousands and thousands of different data points from sort of regional boreholes that have been dug, regional airborne surveys, some other holes that have been dug. So we're pulling together drilled. And we're pulling together obviously all of this data to create this model, and that will happen in parallel to our field exploration up at Hakunsi. Now, I said obviously we've got a strategic stake. So we're focusing on the north and the south of the KSZ, and broadly speaking, the land in between is pretty much covered by a national park. So, I mean, that obviously makes that a no-go in terms of minerals exploration. So we took on these extra 2 licenses, as said, towards the South African border in the southwest of the country, and it's really just to make sure that we've got this real sort of strategic controlling interest over the whole of the KSZ, so that in the event we do find anything at Hakunsi, which is where we're obviously focusing field exploration now, it just gives us a lot more optionality on how we might commercialize this in future. So the size of this project, it could end up going to a major company as a JV. We could end up parceling it up to a number of different companies. We could bring in a strategic investor on one section, or a strategic investor on several, or strategic investors on several sections. So really what these extra licenses give us is they give us basically a sort of this controlling interest, and essentially we become masters of our own destiny.
Okay, great. So moving on to the KCB, then that's the Kalahari Copper Belt. And at the beginning of the week, you announced you had signed a contract with SkyTem to carry out a geophysical survey over about 2,300 kilometres, covering the 2 joint venture projects that you have. Can you remind us of these projects and the plan to develop them?
Sure. So one of the things that I've learned a lot about with Kavango, I mean, I had a loose understanding, but in my time over the last month is quite sort of how extensive our team is in Botswana. We've got 3 exploration teams in the field, run by our one of our co-founders, Hilary Gumbo, who's a trained geologist and geophysicist. So we, as an exploration company in Botswana, are a very attractive firm to work with. The fact that we're now cashed up as well, having raised that money at the end of last year, makes us, an even better partner. So we have currently 2 joint ventures that we're working on in the Kalahari Copper Belt, and we're in discussions with a number of other parties, as you'd expect, with a view potentially to taking on some additional license areas there. Now, the 2 current JVs that we have, we've got one with Power Metals, which obviously British shareholders will be very aware of. We're always fielding questions about Power Metals. This is called the South Guernsey project. We ran a soil and into the beginning of this year, and that soil sampling is ongoing. We also did some pretty extensive reinterpretation work of regional regional geological structures and geosurveys. And we've built a reasonably comprehensive, it's nothing like the 3D model we've done for Hakunsi, but we've got a pretty good understanding of what lies underneath these licenses. And we used that to guide our soil sampling programs. Now, we put this in a recent announcement. One of the things that we were most encouraged by is that some of those soil sampling results, They've come back with elevated levels of zinc, which is a pathfinder mineral. Basically, zinc is more active within soils, so it's more mobile, I should say, sorry. So it moves more freely within the earth. So zinc as an indicator to potentially a copper-silver discovery, that's really what you look for at the sort of first step of exploration. And we found some very encouraging zinc levels in exactly the right space or right place, position, that we would hope, based on what we know about the underground geology. So we were always planning to fly airborne surveys, but based on those soil results and the fact that Power Metals, they put all of their JV commitment, so it wasn't an original 2-year commitment of $150,000. Well, they actually paid all of it. They paid the final amount at the start of this year, which is well ahead of schedule. So with that budget in place, plus obviously the money that we raised last year, we were in a position where we could accelerate our plans for flying airborne surveys, because the exploration techniques over the Kalahari Copper Belt, they're pretty well tried and tested now. It's one of the fastest growing copper exploration plays in the world. Pretty much a month doesn't go by without there being another discovery somewhere. Obviously, British investors will know about T3, which was MOD Resources and Metal Tiger and is now Sandfire. But you also have Kuprick Canyon's mine developments as well. So this really is a hot area. And where in the KSZ, in the Kalahari Suture Zone, we had to learn as we went along. In the KCB, we can actually just use the techniques that others have used to identify these large-scale deposits. And flying these airborne surveys, this is the sort of next significant step. And if we get encouraging results from the airborne surveys, then what we're expecting is that will take us much, much closer towards identifying drill targets. And then our plan, hopefully, will be to drill a bit later on this year. The other joint venture we have is with a local Botswanan company called LVR Geoexplorers. Very similar story to the Power Metals JV. Obviously, the licenses are in very different areas. There's a map on our website. We have a license in the southwest, which of the KCB in Botswana, which is a relatively underexplored area of the Kalahari Copper Belt, but we feel is still highly prospective. We've had encouraging soil sample results, and we want to fly some airborne over that because it'll be the first time that's been done in that area, just to see sort of what comes back. So that's a little bit more speculative. But the second license, we're much, much more excited by. This license borders Kuprick Canyon's Banana Zone discovery, which is one of the big ones in the Kalahari Copper Belt in Botswana. And the soil sample results that we've returned so far are impressive, very impressive. So we'll be flying an airborne survey over that license, and it's early days, so this is this is early stage exploration, so we can't get too carried away. But I think the fact that we've accelerated our airborne program, that sort of gives an idea of sort of how we're feeling about the prospects here.
Well, it certainly sounds like there's an ambitious work program there, Ben, for this year. And I wonder, Ben, if I can ask you just for a final thought then. As a recent appointment in your position, what are your aspirations for Kavango beyond this time frame this year, and what do you see as success for both yourself and for shareholders?
It's really quite simple. It's to make at least one major mineral discovery. We've got 2 fantastic projects, really exciting sort of project areas we're working in the Kalahari Suture Zone and in the Kalahari Copper Belt. The ambition that we've got with the KSZ, I mean, it's off the charts. The comparison with Norilsk was first identified 45 years ago between Norilsk and the KSZ. And everything that we've done surely just built up more and more evidence that seems to indicate that the Kalahari Suture Zone is an undiscovered magmatic sulfide system. Now, if you look at how prolific somewhere like Norilsk is mined continuously for 100 years, it's got at least another 100 years worth of life left in it. It accounts for 20% of the world's current copper. Even if we ended up with sort of a system that could deliver 5% of that, you're talking about a major global mining center. Now, I mean, obviously, we still got a long way to go to prove that. But for the Kalahari Suture Zone, success this year would be to discover magmatic sulfide mineralization in one of the drill holes that we're going to drill. In the Kalahari Copper Belt, the exploration methods in the Kalahari Copper Belt are tried and tested. So we're going down a well-trodden path. So all the companies that have been before us, they've made all the mistakes. You know, they're the ones who've shown what works and what doesn't work, and we're really able to piggyback on that. And based on what we've seen so far, obviously we're encouraged. We're flying these airborne surveys, but success for over the long run is to make a major minerals discovery. It's vitally important that we put every pound that we can into the ground. For me, I've got over 4 million shares at the moment personally. So this is not like a position that I can trade in and out of. I'm a director of the company. So that's obviously basically precluded. So for me, my payday will come if we make a genuine minerals discovery and then are able in some way to commercialize that, whether that be through a trade sale, you know, strategic financing, through a joint venture partner, however that might be. So we are set up as a business to deliver genuine, substantial, fundamental progress.
Okay. Well, Ben Turney there, the Executive Director at Kavango Resources, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this Stockbox interview. For more information, interviews and videos, visit our website at stockboxmedia.com or give us a follow on Twitter by searching @StockboxMedia.